and welcome, history buffs. My name is Nick Hodges, and today's review will be the scary historical film, The Ghost and the Darkness. Now, I'm not gonna lie, this movie terrified me as a kid. Set in 1898 at the height of Europe's scramble for Africa, this is the true story of how Great Britain's attempts to build a bridge across the River Savo was brought to a standstill by two man-eating lions. For almost a year, they stalked the campsites and were reportedly responsible for the deaths of 135 victims. Colonel John Patterson, a British Army engineer tasked with building the bridge, spent 10 months trying to hunt down these unstoppable monsters. The terrified locals did not think they were actually lions at all, but demons that they called the Ghost and the Darkness. At the peak of European imperialism in Africa, the British Empire had a grand plan to overtake their European rivals to become the most dominant power in the region.
We're in a race, Colonel, and the prize is nothing less than the continent of Africa. We are building the most expensive and daring railroad in history for the glorious purpose of saving Africa from the Africans and, of course, to end slavery. Our competitors are the Germans and the French. We are ahead, and we will stay ahead, provided you do what I've hired you to do. Build a bridge across the River Savo and be finished in 5 months.
By building this railway, British influence would be felt throughout the entire continent, all the way from Lake Victoria to the port of Mombasa, thereby ensuring a trade link to India. Now, as much as the Brits were completely full of themselves with the idea of saving Africa from the Africans, there was truth to what they were saying about their attempts to end slavery. Savo was routinely crossed by Arab slaver caravans on their way to the slave markets in Mombasa. In fact, it may be because of these caravans why these man-eating lions ever became such a problem. The appalling conditions of the long, arduous journey to Mombasa would have resulted in a number of sick slaves. The Arab slavers would then just toss the dead and dying into the African bush, making easy prey for the lions. These caravans went on uninterrupted for centuries, and it's quite possible that the Savo lions had gotten used to the taste of human flesh. So when the British finally put an end to the African slave trade, the Arab slavers may have left, but the lions certainly didn't, and the very bridge Patterson was tasked to build was right on the foundations of the Savo lions' hunting grounds. Another reason why so many of the construction crew were killed by these lions was due to their country of origin. Since many of the African natives refused to work on building this bridge, the British resorted to importing thousands of Indians instead. Unlike the African locals who were used to the wildlife in Savo, these poor men knew little to nothing about how to protect themselves. They were probably more focused on just doing their jobs and not in their worst nightmares would they have considered that they were being watched. There was also the issue of just how many of them there were. Up to several thousand men were scattered all along the railroad for up to 30 miles. These small pockets of campsites were extremely isolated, exposed, and vulnerable out in the open. So when the lion attacks began, they had absolutely no protection. Now, although the lives of the construction crew was indeed Patterson's responsibility, the fact of the matter was that he was just simply not an experienced hunter. What would often happen is that he would spend the night in a tree close to where a lion attack had originally taken place. He would then wake up and find out the next morning that the lions had attacked in a completely different part of the camp.
2 are dead now in 2 nights.
The second.
Far end of the camp. A man wandering alone at night. There's even less of him than there was of Mahina.
What made matters even worse was just the lack of firearms that were available. Out of thousands of workers sprawled out for miles building this bloody bridge and railway, there were very few guns between them, and the guys who had guns would be running around like crazy trying to get to wherever the next line attack was, and by the time they got there, it was usually too late. So the next solution in trying to defend themselves was to build these really sharp thorn bush fences around their camps called bomas. Now, bomas generally do tend to work in keeping lions out in other parts of Africa, but these lions would almost magically appear and disappear as if the bomas weren't even there at all. This is the moment when some of the locals stopped even seeing them as lions, but as supernatural predators.
The men called them the Ghost in the Darkness. There were two of them. And that had never happened before, because men-eaters are always alone. They owned the nights, but they also attacked in daylight, alone or together, without fear or reason. Some thought they were not lions at all, but the spirits of dead medicine men come back to spread madness. For others, they were the devil, sent to stop the white men from owning the world. I believed this, that they were evil. And what better ground for evil to walk than Tsavo? Because this is what the word Tsavo means, a place of slaughter.
When it comes to historical inaccuracies, The Ghost in the Darkness has more than its fair share. For example, the character of Remington is totally made up. More often than not, Patterson hunted these lions alone, but this doesn't necessarily bother me, as it's pretty clear that the filmmakers want to condense many of the real people Patterson interacts with into a single character. However, in my opinion, I think that the biggest historical inaccuracy are with the lions themselves. Now, you think that wouldn't be the case, since the movie consistently points out that there is something very special about these lions, something that sets them apart from all others.
There's a legend here. Two man-eaters are making all the trouble.
Oh, this is Africa, Patterson. I thought you were a hunter.
It's not that simple. These lions are not like lions.
But apparently, this is only just referring to their savagery and being extremely intelligent. And whilst yes, this is all absolutely true, the filmmakers also decided to exclude one very important detail. Lions from Tsavo are actually maneless. Now, you might be wondering why on earth am I being so picky over such a seemingly small detail? Well, the truth of the matter is that it might actually have a lot to do with exactly why these lions were so effective in killing people. Although scientists still don't know exactly why Tsavo male lions are maneless, there are a couple of theories that do help explain. One being that manes tend to be impractical in this part of Africa and get in the way of their hunting due to the local vegetation, and that by being thorny bushes. Starts to make sense exactly how those lions were able to get past those impregnable bomas, since more than likely they were able just to squeeze right through them. Another theory being that Tsavo male lions have higher levels of testosterone that reduces their chances in having mates. That in turn would also explain why they are so formidably dangerous and aggressive. Tsavo male lions are also known to be much larger than other males. When Patterson finally shot the real lions, they were measured to be 9 feet in length. Now that I have established exactly why having these lions be maneless is such an important detail, the next obvious question is, why did the filmmakers feel the need to ditch it? Well, to be honest, I don't know exactly why they did. I mean, maybe because manes just look so awesome on a lion, and having them doesn't really take too much away from the movie. Or quite possibly, it was much more practical to find and train a common mane lion. I mean, to be honest, I think this is nerve-wracking enough, rather than finding the courage to work with the infamous Tsavo lions. So apart from a few details changed here and there, this movie is actually quite accurate. The scene where Patterson builds his elaborate boxcart trap to kill one of the lions is one such example.
The other side of these bars will be bait, human bait.
I'll start things off. About here will be a tripwire for this sliding door.
Oh, jeez. The beast will enter, tripping the wire. The door will slide down behind him, trapping him. You, meanwhile, safe behind your bars, will have the beast at your mercy and will shoot him at your leisure.
In the movie, Patterson hires Indian criminals to be human bait, but in real life, Patterson used Indian sepoys. I have no idea why this was changed, because this doesn't exactly add anything to the movie, but then again, neither does it take anything away, because the end result is exactly the same. One of the lions was indeed successfully lured into the boxcar, and the trap worked. Now guys, I know this seems unbelievable, but this is pretty much exactly what happened. The lion immediately went into a rage and started aggressively smashing himself against the bars and against the walls. The sepoys were less than 15 feet away from this lion, and they just couldn't hit it. They were so close, in fact, that one of the men actually lost his hearing due to the lion's powerful roar. Eventually, one of the bullets hit the lock in the trapdoor and the lion was able to escape. And this is something that happened consistently during Patterson's hunt. This guy really had the worst luck in the world in trying to kill these things. I mean, like, time and time again, when he thought he had the upper hand, something would go terribly wrong. Another obstacle Patterson had to overcome was just how cunning these lions were. Since the lions didn't usually like to attack the same place twice, he had to think 2 steps ahead and try to figure out exactly what would be their next target. When he noticed fresh paw prints around the camp hospital, he had all the patients moved to another makeshift hospital tent on the other side of the camp. Then at the old hospital, Patterson and his men splashed the walls and the floors with blood, leaving behind bits of animal carcass, and then waited for the lions to come. Yet once again did the lions outwit Patterson and his men, and instead headed to the new hospital. Now, because Patterson's story is so incredible, there are many skeptics out there in the academic community who just find it all hard to believe, and you know what? I can't exactly blame them. I mean, there are so many things that Patterson reported seeing in his book, The Man-Eaters of Tsavo, that read like fantastic fiction. One event that stands out from any other actually took place after Patterson had killed the lions. Whilst Patterson was hunting in the African bush, he came across a cave and was compelled to go in. Upon entering the cave, he made a horrifying discovery.
Holy Christ. Lions don't do this. Lions never had a lair like this. They're doing it for the pleasure.
It sounds like it's totally made up, and for the longest time, that's exactly what people thought Patterson did. That he embellished on the story a little bit to spice things up. The only proof he had was a picture he had taken of the cave entrance. The whereabouts of this cave became a total mystery until it was rediscovered in 1997. However, scientists were unable to find the piles of human bones Patterson described, allowing some historians to even question how much of his story with the lions was even true. That the 135 victims Patterson claimed had been killed by the lions might also have been exaggerated. After all, the Ugandan Railway Company only acknowledged the deaths of 28 Indian workers, but I think it's quite possible that the British weren't particularly great at record keeping, or for that matter, cared how many Africans and Indians died building their railway. I'm also sure they would have considered the whole man-eating affair thing to be quite embarrassing.
Do we wish the world to think that the builders of the British Empire are afraid to do their job because of a few minor difficulties with the local wildlife?
Nevertheless, scientists recently took hair samples from the stuffed man-eaters that are now on display at the Chicago Field Museum, and then they analysed their chemical composition to determine how many people they actually ate in the last 3 months of their lives. The research concluded that one lion ate 11 people and the other ate 24, thereby confirming some historian suspicions. However, this only proves how many people they ate and doesn't disprove Patterson's claims that these lions were mostly just killing for fun, which I think is more than a possibility. I mean, like, if you look at your common house cat, you can see how much pleasure it gets in killing mice that they never eat. All of these points are indeed quite plausible, but that's not what people have a hard time in believing. It's simply the alarming numbers that these lions killed, because nothing like this has ever happened before or since. We as human beings take great pride in our conquest over the natural world, but we also find the idea truly disturbing when nature fights back. I can honestly say that this is one of my favourite historical movies of all time, and yet I can't understand for the life of me how in the hell this got a lower score than The Bloody Patriot on Rotten Tomatoes, because it not only captures more than enough elements of the original story to be considered faithful, but also expands on these moments to invoke feelings of terror, suspense, excitement, that sense of wonder and adventure in the African landscape. The film's score and cinematography perfectly complement each other to provide the audience a truly epic movie-going experience. To this very day, when I hear this piece of music, it just gets me pumped up and longing to go to Africa and see this beautiful landscape. You seriously cannot tell me that music doesn't sound awesome. I mean, you have to at least admit that it's way more memorable than whatever generic crap John Williams composed for The Patriot. Now, some critics state that their low scores due to the poor performances by Val Kilmer and Michael Douglas, but you know what? I've seen worse, and I think you all have as well, so I'm sure the majority of you haven't seen it yet will be quite forgiving. All I can tell you is just how much enjoyment I got out of watching this movie, and if a film is capable of telling a true story faithfully and firing up your imagination like it did with mine, then I consider it to be a great historical film. Well, that about wraps it up. My name is Nick Hodges, and thanks for watching History Buffs. And remember, if you like the show, help the channel grow. Don't forget to hit that like and subscribe button. And let me know in the comments section what you thought about The Ghost and the Darkness. And of course, what historical movie should I review next? In the meantime, check out the History Buffs Twitter and Facebook pages for new updates. Until then, I'll see you next time.